Welcome to the Recklessly Skeptical Podcast. My name is Matt.
My name is Josh.
And I'm Joe.
And today is Sunday, May 21st, 2017. And it's a special day because we have a special guest.
Coming in from the Dignitary Podcast, weighing in at about 120, 180, 160?
It's getting up there. You offered me a couple of cookies trying to bring that number up.
We have Jacob IsBell from the Dignitary Podcast. He's a friend of mine and a coworker, and he's a good human being. And we're having him on today to discuss Mormonism because he knows a bit more than we do.
Oh, I'm happy to give whatever I can. Usually I have a Brigham's Brew root beer in my hand that brings the spirit a little bit more when discussing these topics. But right now I am holding Cock and Bull ginger soda.
Good old Cock and Bull.
Yep. All right, so let's start off with the stolen thought.
Let's get this going. So, if my device will work. All right, so this quote is coming from Sam Harris. Here we go. Quote, "It is time that we admitted that faith is nothing more than the license religious people give one another to keep believing when reason fails." End quote. And I want to delve further into faith once we get going, but I wanted to just give that, and if you guys have any basic thoughts on that quote, feel free. Or we can wait and talk about it when we get into the podcast.
Faux shizzle.
Yeah, let's talk about it more later. So I have the Gallup Daily poll, and this is the Gallup Daily Trump job approval. Real unemployment at 8.6%, Gallup good jobs at 45.1%, engaged at work at 34.1%, economic confidence is up to 5%, and consumer spending is up again to 111, and Trump approval rating has gone down pretty significantly this week, down to 37%.
Ooh,
and it's
getting lower, man. It just keeps getting lower.
Disapproval rating is at 56%, so he's 19 points underwater if you care about that sort of a thing. All right, and the one story we wanted to cover before we get into the meat of the show is that this is coming from NBC News. Flynn, Manafort are key figures in Russian probe. Mueller will lead. Former Trump aides Michael Flynn and Paul Manafort have emerged as key figures in the FBI's investigation into the Russian campaign interference, which has been taken over by a special counsel for law enforcement officers or officials told NBC News. Officials say multiple grand jury subpoenas and record requests have been issued in connection with the two men in the past 6 months in the ongoing probe into whether the Trump campaign colluded with Russians attempts to influence the election, an inquiry that will now be overseen by former FBI Director Robert Mueller. So, like, the biggest story coming out of this week is the fact that in the wake of Trump firing Comey, yes, he fired Comey, and so the Senate decided, or Congress decided to appoint a special person, which is Robert Mueller, the former FBI director, to look into any Trump-Russian connections. So I'm actually kind of curious, Jacob. Where do you think that there's anything there, or do you not think that there's anything there?
Well, when I take a look at just the FBI leadership and who's in charge, leading into the elections, you've got Comey saying Hillary Clinton is under investigation, and everybody on the left explodes and says he's trying to sway the election for Trump. He needs to be fired. And now that Trump is firing him, he's a good man just doing his job, we need to keep him. And I think what shows over and over again is it is about power. It is about maintaining power. Robert Mueller, whether there is a Russian connection or not, he's being selected. They're not going to put anybody up for that position if he's not going to help the current people in power maintain their power.
I would just add, whether there's hypocrisy on the left, to me, doesn't really matter. I wasn't in that category where I was yelling I wanted him fired before, but the fact that he did fire him at that point in time, and one moment he's praising him during the campaign, and then now he's firing him, and his flip-flopping on Comey, Trump is who I'm talking about, shows that there is something. I'm not saying there's an actual Russian conspiracy going on, but there has to be something, or Trump is really just a moron and making decisions off the seam of his pants or whatever they say, and he's not really thinking about it, and he's making things look weird.
Yeah, as far as, let me go back to your original question, which I just gave my other thoughts instead. Is there a connection between Russia? I doubt there's much. And if there is something, it's going to be, this is something, it's a violation, and all of a sudden we care so much about these little violations, impeachment, when the fact of the matter is he was being surveyed during the presidency. Trump Tower was being tapped. It had been going on for months. It had been reported by mainstream media months prior, and if they've got nothing to show by now, I doubt there's much of anything.
Kind of like with the whole Hillary investigation. If there was something, they would have done something.
Well, that was a little bit different because when Hillary Clinton stood up, she said, there's nothing going on. But Comey, that very next day or that same day, had to say, we're not saying that other people wouldn't be up on felony charges if they do the same exact thing.
But I still want citation.
We're saying, so look that up right now.
We looked it up for the last podcast.
Because I claimed the same
and we
thing
couldn't
on the-
find it.
In other words, James Comey's words specifically, we're not saying that other people wouldn't be charged with crimes if they do the same thing, but we've decided that we're not going to continue the investigation of Hillary Clinton. So it was quite a tip-tap. And when he was asked specifically... is Hillary Clinton being honest in the way that she portrays it, or is she being accurate? Well, she's in charge of that. What I'll say is, in other words, he made sure that he stayed away from how Hillary Clinton, because they've got a lot of incentive to spin it positively, like every politician seeking power. But he made sure that his buns were covered. Yes, we charge people with crimes for these actions. We're just not in this situation.
So how would you feel if it was found? Because I think the concern with Trump is that he's enriching himself off of the office, and he's using political power to either make himself or people close to him more wealthy. I mean, how would you feel about that if that turns out to be the case?
Well, that's the standard practice for decades and decades.
Yeah.
When you look at the highest concentration of millionaires inside of our country, it is that vicinity right around Washington, D.C., that center of power. When you look
It's different, though.
Let
It's
me
a little
bring this
different.
up. When you bring up somebody who's been in public service their whole life, never once had a regular job that they maintain, somebody like Hillary Clinton who gains a net worth in the tens of millions of dollars. Loretta Lynch, I'm making $500,000 a year in public service. Now I'm worth tens of millions of dollars.
Well, it's because usually the trick is they turn around and work on K Street. So they work for the people who are giving donations to the politicians. And we've talked about this several times on the podcast. A problem with that format because it seems to corrupt our politicians and give them more favors. Politicians
They're
act more
sickening people.
favorably towards.
In other words, it would be difficult to make my opinion of Donald Trump much lower.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that I think there is some sort of connection with the Russians, but I think it's at a financial level previously where they were buying real estate off of him, or he was going broke and they invested in him. There's some sort of financial investment there.
One of the most common ways of enriching politicians in backroom deals. Hey, we'd like your support on such and such. You know what? I have a contact. He's got really good information on real estate deals. You know what? There's a house you might be able to get it for a certain price. Maybe a couple of years later, you might be able to sell it and make a few million in profit. Would you like me to get you in contact with that person? I'm glad that we've got your support on this bill that we're needing your support on. Oh, and our lobbyists are the same ones that wrote it up.
Well, see, and Trump himself even donated money to Hillary Clinton 10, 15
and
years
he
ago.
loves to tout it.
Yeah, so, yeah.
We need to get one of those fidget spinners that looked like, because you were grabbing the tape and tearing at it.
Oh, I am. I'm so jealous of the fidget spinners. I'll just do the cock and bull top for my soda and drop it.
All right, so I think that kind of lays some stuff out there to think about. But yeah, let's get into the meat of the show. So we were going to talk more about Mormonism. A few podcasts ago, we were talking about some of the cosmology of Mormonism, and I kind of shied away from it because I didn't feel like enough of an authority, and I thought that it'd be good to have some sort of authority on here. So, Jacob, why don't you talk a little bit about like your stance on the church and how you feel about Mormonism, because you are one.
I am a lifelong member of the church. So my papa was a convert on his side. He was somebody was not raised with any religious background. He himself saw a very broken and abusive home when he was a little boy. It was when he was in his 20s in the military that he had read the New Testament. He gained a testimony from that of Jesus Christ, and he felt the goodness. He felt a longing to know what was true. It ended up turning into, he was praying on a daily basis, show me what's right, show me what's true. He ended up hearing Cat Stevens playing in the barracks over yonder, and met a soldier who had what looked to be 2 Bibles sitting on his bed, found out one of them was the Book of Mormon, and that started him on his path. His comments about that time in his life was, when I learned the principles, because he already had testimony of the New Testament and a lot of understanding from reading that multiple times in a row. He said, when I learned these concepts as far as living before we were born, the purpose of this life and afterwards, he said, it rang true for me. It felt so familiar. So for me, I've got the benefit of being raised in an incredibly stable home. Now, even with that, at about age 13 in my life is when I moved from small redneck town in Oregon, Molalla, Oregon, moved to Logan, Utah, of all places. And this is my first time being in a Mormon-dominant environment. And it is the first time in my life that I find myself struggling with testimony, because I feel like, hey, all these people who are jerks to me and make me feel insecure are all members of the church that I've believed in my whole life. And it was at 13 that I smoked pot for the first time. I even started drinking. But I got to the point where I was drinking on pretty much a daily basis. Yeah, pretty much. And I even getting drunk so late at night when I'd sneak out that I'd still be drunk when I woke up the next morning, and I'd sleep my way through seminary and go to church and sleep it off a little bit there till I'm no longer drunk. I was at that time involved in robberies and organizing with a number of other young people. We were Mormons as well. Now, this is now back in this redneck small town of Molalla. We had moved back. We even called ourselves the Mormon Mafia or the Gideon Robbers. Just those were the references that we knew.
Yeah.
But we organized robbing a couple of places, and we did it repeatedly at night where we wouldn't get caught. So no strong arm robberies or anything like that, but sneaking into places and stealing stuff.
Yeah.
It was getting caught for that. That was the brick wall in my life. And that's what brought me to the point to where, hey, do I believe this or not? Because I'm not going to fake it. And I had already been raised, hey, you can pray, you can know for yourself. All right, fine. I'm going to do that. And if I come to the conclusion, if I don't get an answer, or if I get an answer that this isn't where I'm supposed to be, I'm going to tell my parents. My dad's my bishop at the time. I'm going to say, hey, I'm not going to be a member of the church anymore. And I knew that it would have broken my parents' heart, especially my mom. But I knew that my dad especially, his understanding of the freedom to choose for oneself is a fundamental part of our religion, and he would have respected that. It was a process that went on for months. I changed the habits inside of my life. I found myself struggling, yearning to know what's true, and I remember receiving an answer that I recognized. This is right about age 15, slightly before I turned 16. Angel Moroni didn't appear to me, but I felt something that was, there's a clarity, there's a confidence. I felt something click in my mind while feeling the confidence associated with, and I said, no, I'm feeling it, and I've been feeling it for some time. And that was the impression that I got. Jacob, you've been feeling it since you've made these changes in your life. As I made, like, that was the brick wall moment. Okay, this is what I'm going to follow. I'm going to try my best. And I felt that influence become much stronger throughout the next years of my life. So there's my younger years, and I'll simply summarize by saying, I left to be a worthy missionary at age 19, having spent months in a row going out with the missionaries on a daily basis, studying every bit of anti-Mormon stuff that could come across me, because this is in the I'll give you one more. The days of AOL, and you remember that? You've got mail.
Yeah.
So on my AOL profile, I put something about being Mormon on there. And now I've got youth pastors typing me IMs, wanting to save me from being a Mormon missionary. I'm like, okay. And so I probably had an hour, sometimes 2 hours a day of people wanting me to read stuff. I'm like, okay, I'd read it. And but Joseph Smith teaches you guys can become gods. I'm like, really? And it's like, yes, you should read the King Follett Discourse. I'm like, all right, I'll get back to you tomorrow. Show me where it's at. Okay, I'll read it. And I loved it. I read the King Follett Discourse, and I left with an even stronger testimony. This is an inspired man. I believe that he is a true prophet of God. And I tell him the next day, thank you for sharing that with me. I had never read that before. Well, you need to read such and such. And for example, I've got an interpretation of what the book of Romans teaches. You guys teach something else. You should read the book of Romans. And I read it. And I love it. And I feel like, hey, I'm on board with everything I'm about to go out and teach. And so there's not much now, because now you got the internet, you got a whole bunch of stuff that has shock value for those who've kept themselves inside of a Mormon bubble. And listen to a very whitewashed version of what our history is and what our faith is, and they can't handle it, and it's difficult. Well, I felt like I already went through it. For one thing, I got a papa who exposed me to as much as I possibly could be exposed to at that age. And even now, nothing has the shock value, but I realize, hey, there's a lot of stuff that I don't know.
Yeah, and just real quick, as an asterisk, the two things that this is not a debate. We're not trying to say that Jacob's experience is wrong or that Jacob's beliefs are wrong. We're just trying to get all of the because we think that it's interesting to get it all out on the table and then let the listener decide for themselves. The other thing we're not doing is prescribing atheism or prescribing Mormonism. We're not prescribing anything. We're not saying anybody else is wrong. So we're not trying to say this is more sane or less sane than any other worldview.
It's all insane.
So,
and I'm okay with that.
I got a quick question, though. You were talking about how your father and you prescribed to the New Testament and stuff. Do Mormons believe in the Old Testament?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a lot of people who go to great lengths to try to say there's complete continuity between Adam and Eve through the Old Testament on through the New Testament and the Book of Mormon, that it's all in harmony with one another. Well, and that's a very difficult thing to do unless you're just kind of picking and choosing stuff. But yes, I for one fell in love with the Old Testament in my 20s.
I will say, though, anytime I've argued with a Mormon and I bring up something horrible that's in the Old Testament, that's the sections that they deny and say. Because Mormons say the Bible is flawed, correct?
Well, they say that they believe it in as much as it's translated correctly.
So whenever there's something that's bad, they say, oh, I don't believe that part.
It was translated.
Okay, that couldn't be there.
And first refereeing point, because I guess I'm playing referee. I do think that it's important for us to go into our backgrounds in brief. So that there's more context to the
They
discussion.
call themselves the evil atheists, and we don't know.
But, I mean, they weren't raised atheists. There was not that going on. But why don't you, Joe, we'll go oldest to youngest.
Okay, my mother was raised Mormon, and she was a lot of her family was polygamous. She was introduced to my father, who was already married.
Can I just get a little bit of clarity? When you say raised Mormon, mainstream Mormon?
No, she was raised FLDS.
Yeah, FLDS.
Okay.
So she was introduced to my father, who was already married, in his 30s. My mom was...
No, he was like in his 40s.
Oh, 40s.
Like 42.
My mom was quite young, 17. And her sisters talked her into a polygamous marriage. And my father had already had, I think, 10 children by then.
Yes.
And then started having children with my mother. And so Matt and I were raised polygamous, but we grew up going to a Baptist church.
Well,
so it was very interesting.
Well, I mean, there's a split there. So we were raised polygamous until I was 5. Then my mom left my dad.
Okay.
But we were going to the Baptist church the whole time because we weren't allowed to go to a Mormon church because of the polygamy.
Yeah.
Dad was excommunicated from the church.
Yes,
so
I know that.
So we were going to a Baptist church, and we were going there since we were babies.
Good. Now, in the Baptist church, was it common knowledge that you guys came from fundamental Mormon background?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And then my mother met a friend, and that friend of hers talked my mom out of, guided my mom and helped her through leaving my father and leaving the polygamy and stuff. So, which was pretty interesting. And so Matt and I continued going to the Baptist church after all of this for many years, and then for a long time, I don't know, the norm wasn't quite so norm, and I don't know, it was a really interesting time in our lives, but for me, I always kind of questioned it. I remember asking the school the Sunday school teacher questions, and it never made any sense to me.
What did you find yourself questioning the most? I'm interested in that.
Heaven.
Still policing. So you can get to those questions, Jacob, in just a minute. Matt, do you have anything you want to add to that, like from your perspective growing up?
No, I think Joe summed it up pretty well.
Okay, and then just to quickly go, I was born and raised Mormon. Both my parents are converts to the Mormon Church. They're actually serving an LDS mission right now in Salt Lake City, and I. At 18, started drinking and partying and stuff. Kind of the similar stories. I don't think I ever successfully robbed a place, even though I planned on doing it once.
Matt and I have.
Yeah, go you guys. And then I at about 21, 22-ish, I took some philosophy classes and kind of came to realize that I was very skeptical about most of the stories that any religion tells. So started going through that transition, and then I am an atheist. I was an atheist at about 26, or started feeling comfortable calling myself an atheist around 26. All right, so now you had a question for Joseph. We can go into that.
I'm interested because I'm picturing you guys like what, around 4 and 5 years old, around that age when you're. Well, tell me, what age were you when you were having these questions? Where you're saying I felt unsatisfying answers in Sunday school?
Well, it was around 10. Like I started,
10, okay.
They started, because we always just kind of listened and stuff, and but as I got older, I started putting more together, of course, and I just saw too many
inconsistencies.
Yeah, inconsistencies with it. I started asking a lot of questions. It got to the point to where if I asked a question, I got in trouble because I was pointing things out, and so I just stopped asking questions. And I don't know, 1, 2, like seeing my mom, I thought polygamy was fine. Polygamy was the norm. Polygamy was right. And then seeing my mom question polygamy kind of, made me feel like it was okay to question whatever. And so I started questioning, and I was never really comfortable with calling myself an atheist until I always considered myself, in my teenage years and stuff like that, someone who was agnostic. I didn't care. Yeah. I don't care if, growing up, I didn't care if there was a God or if there was. I didn't give a shit, whatever. It doesn't concern me. I have nothing to do with that. If he comes down and tries to talk to me, if there is one, I'm going to tell him to move on. And then with Matt actually started, once Matt became officially an atheist and he started talking to me more about it in the most recent years, I was like, oh, God, I am an atheist, aren't I? Because Matt asked me a few simple questions, and I answered them honestly, and he's all, you're an atheist. And
a lot of people do not want to accept that label, or they don't understand it exactly.
Yeah.
And, yes, you ask them a few basic questions, and if they answer them a certain way, honestly, then they are an atheist.
Okay, and actually, why don't I let's see if there is any misconception. Jacob, what do you think an atheist is?
I just described it as somebody who doesn't have a belief in a higher power or being, something to that effect.
Okay. Yeah, that's basically all it is.
Yep.
It isn't someone who claims there isn't. It's just that we lack the belief due to lack of evidence. Yeah. And so we're not going around
saying there is no God.
Yeah, it's like, no, I don't believe your claim. Or anyone else's.
Yeah, and one funny thing I've heard from a Muslim once, because I've done a couple Muslim videos on YouTube, is that I'm halfway to being a Muslim because their saying is there is no God but Allah, and so I'm halfway there.
There we go.
So I do have a question for Jacob to maybe we can get this ball rolling.
Dude, roll this ball. I hope it's a boulder. I hope we get to have a full-on Indiana Jones sort of scene.
Running through the cave.
And he's even wearing a hat. So
Dude, I'm ready. It's one of these communist-styled hats.
I love those hats, by the way.
They're comfy.
You do have kind of like a Cuban.
I wore my red stitched shirt,
Yeah.
and I got my hat that's kind of got the slightly militant form to it.
Yeah, you got the beard.
Yes.
You definitely look like
You are
could be
Fidel Castro.
I'm just going to take people's property violently and give it to people who don't know how to work the land.
There you go.
Okay, so I kind of came up with this question because of something you said when you were giving your little introduction. You said you were trying to figure out what you knew was true. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask you, do you claim that you know Mormonism is true? That you know that it's true?
I wouldn't even... Now, I use the term Mormonism just because it's the easiest for people to identify. I don't self-identify as I'm a Mormon, as in belonging to a church. I feel like I got a personal testimony where even, let's say right now, that the Mormon apostles and prophets have a big, huge scandal, and it's shown that they've been doing this for so long, it wouldn't affect my testimony much at all.
Let me rephrase the question then, because I'm trying to get to the heart of it, I guess. Do you claim that you know Joseph Smith was a prophet of God?
Yes. So in other words, and I'm reserved about using that term. I know because it's different than different things that we know. Because I know from listening to your podcast how this is the standard of evidence. At this point, we know such and such. It is spiritual confirmations. But yes, I very, very firmly believe that Joseph Smith really did have the experience that he had, where he claimed God the Father and Jesus Christ spoke to him, that the Book of Mormon is what it purports to be, a record of an ancient people and their dealings with God as well as the personal ministry of Jesus Christ.
Okay. And just I do want to quickly dispel a number of Mormon things. So there are four. So in Mormonism, or again, we're using that term loosely just because of the. It's easiest to identify. There are four canon scriptures, right?
Yeah, and four books of work that are considered canonical. You've got the Old Testament, you've got the New Testament, you've got the Book of Mormon published in 1830. Around that same time, the Doctrine and Covenants were being formed during the 1830s and early 1840s, as well as the Pearl of Great Price, which part of it purports to be Joseph Smith's inspired translation of the Bible. Part of it purports to be Joseph Smith's translation of Egyptian papyri, as well as a few other pieces of church history and the Articles of Faith, which is a quick summary of some of our fundamental beliefs.
Okay, and we'll dive into that in more depth in a little bit. Also, a second thing, do Mormon?
Let me give a little bit of let me tout a little bit of my background. So not only am I a lifelong member, I fireball missionary in the Midwest. Returned home. I've been a seminary teacher for a couple of years. I've been a Sunday school teacher off and on for 7 or 8 years, and I'm currently the young men's president in my congregation in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in a Spanish-speaking congregation. So married in the temple, got 2 kids. So in other words, I'm about as the people from the outside would view me about as mainstream as you can get, but I know that I am different than most members of the church, because most members of the church don't get exposed to the uncomfortable history that we're made up of.
And that uncomfortable history, but you do. Do you deny any of the crimes that Joseph Smith was charged with or anything like that, or because I know a lot of people, I've talked to some Mormons about it, and they say that almost like a conspiracy theory that no, that never happened. That was just the United States government trying to denounce Joseph Smith, but he definitely was charged with a lot of things. I have quite the list here.
Yeah, let's go down the list.
All right, I'll just run through the list.
Let me say this. I don't deny any of it. There's some stuff that you got to look at. Hey, is there motivation for bringing persecution on somebody? Because that's a motivating factor. We're already talking about Comey's firing and other things.
Yeah.
And we know that there's people who are seeking for power and other people trying to use the law. So that's got to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, see, and that's one thing, because I when I was running through my years of trying to figure out who I was, what I believed in, was there any truth in anything, I looked into the Mormon religion and Satanism and everything else, and and I remember reading this about Joseph Smith. I do remember you said 1830s. That's when the Book of Mormon came out. Also, he used a stone, a seer stone, to read the tablets. But I wanted to run through this. In 1826, he was charged as a disorderly person or a glass lurker, pretending to find hidden treasure on people's property with a magic stone.
And this is prior to the writing of the book.
Yes,
This is prior to the writing. 1830, New York, disorderly person twice in 1830. 1831 through 38, he faced many illegal banking and banking fraud charges. 1837, conspiracy to murder Grandison Newell. In 1838, Ohio, he was arrested for banking fraud, or there was a warrant out for his arrest for banking fraud. He fled to Missouri. 1838, charged with threats against Judge Adam Black. 1838, Missouri, arrested by state troops for treason. 2 escape attempts in a 4-month period.
At least 2. Both of them were successful, weren't they?
He was caught.
Hopefully he was in good shape.
The third one, he did finally escape and fled to Illinois. 1842, conspiracy to murder Governor Boggs. 1843, arrested for the Missouri treason case. 1844, he was arrested for perjury, fornication, and polygamy. 1844, Illinois, he was arrested for enticing a riot. Basically, he was arrested for ordering the destruction of a printing press and the burning of a building that housed it after an article was printed about Joseph Smith practicing polygamy, which the church admitted to his polygamy acts in 2014 on LDS.org. And then 1844, he was again arrested for treason against Illinois, which at that time he was murdered in prison or in jail.
So before we let Jacob respond, I just want to throw a little caveat in there that the polygamy, I just want to say, and I think everybody here, like, we're okay with polygamy. So the fact that he was arrested for it or whatever,
Well, I was just pointing out how the Mormon Church denied for
In other words-
so many years that he was a polygamist.
So that history that you put up right there,
but I think the main things to address are the fraud things, where he was robbing people using seer stones.
And we'll talk more about polygamy later, but the fraud is, we're not worried about somebody committing fornication.
Because
I
you can fuck
could have
whoever
been
you want.
arrested for fornication probably
a lot of times.
a lot of times. I'd still be in jail.
Yep.
So,
regarding that list right there, I certainly don't deny that's the history of his legal dealings. Much of that, probably the thing that's a bit disconcerting to me is that he denied polygamy his entire life. Had people sign sworn affidavits, no, I wasn't doing it. The Nauvoo Expositor, I ended up reading it for the first time last year, read the whole thing. And a lot of it is kind of flowery, poetic sort of nonsense. But the two things that it goes into, the accusations, the Nauvoo Expositor, which is Joseph Smith, as the mayor of Nauvoo, held a city council. That's a nuisance. We're going to use the authority of law, and we're going to destroy it. The two things that it accused him of are got to get my grammar right. My mom might even be listening. Practicing polygamy, which he denied his whole life. And William Law, as well as others, saying he's aspiring to too much power and needs to be put in check. And those were the two things. And I realized, okay, how much power he's aspiring to? Yep. I think that is very much open for debate.
Because he ran for president.
He did. He ran for president and felt he was going to do it. There's even more along those lines that would probably cause a lot of mainstream Mormons who have just read the sanitized version of our history. It would be a bit much for them. Probably the work that I know of that gets most in-depth into each one of these things is Richard Bushman's Rough Stone Rolling. See, he's currently a patriarch for the church, but all of these aspects he gets into. It does bother me that he denied it and went to great lengths to deny it. And the church from its earliest days, Brigham Young as well as the others who were the most prominent polygamists, even though polygamy was a very small percentage of the church after Joseph Smith's death and the following decades, it was all, we were taught this by Joseph. This is a principle that was taught us by the founder that we believe had direct contact from God, and many of them continued to assert that they had the same prophetic connection. So
But what do you make of those fraud claims?
Yeah, especially so the one that I want to focus on
because he was using a seer stone to find gold on somebody's property, right?
So as far as being found to be a disorderly person prior to the translation of the Book of Mormon, using seer stones. Now Richard Bushman's another one. He gets into this specifically. What do we know? What are the records that we have on file? There was people at the time who were fraudsters, and here's the basic actions of a fraudster. I know where treasure is buried. I have this gift, and if you buy shares into it, you're going to get a part of it. And they get enough money, and they skip town because we can't electronically identify them like we can nowadays with technology. There's nothing like that with Joseph Smith. There's no record that indicates he ever solicited work. Hey, I have this ability. Nothing. The only record that there is regarding that is people saying, hey, we recognize he's got a gift. It was something common of the time where people believe.
There's actually a court record.
Yeah, court record. Yeah. But in other words, never soliciting services. Josiah Stoll, where he ended up meeting his wife Emma Hale, sought him and then even testified on his behalf that he was a good person.
And so much for going through some points really fast because that one just got exploded into. But I think we do want to take a moment to talk about seer stones because I think those are interesting. But if he was using seer stones before he got the gift of revelation, I mean, it sounds like that'd be something that he was making up or continuing from a past that doesn't have any basis in reality. So let's... Prior to addressing that, what are seer stones?
To my understanding, it's a stone, and people would concentrate their mind and try to get a second sight in seeing into it. the extent of my knowledge on seer stones, I understand that Joseph Smith was using it prior to the translation of the Book of Mormon, regularly throughout the translation of the Book of Mormon, and even afterwards. I've tried to find stones that I thought, well, are you special at all? Put it inside of my hat, and I haven't. But I mean this very sincerely. Okay, can I clear my mind? How does this work? And I haven't had anything. I am somebody not only very open, but I embrace the idea to where there are skills that we have, maybe spiritual gifts, and there may be other instruments that would help us tune into a connection.
Yeah, and you understand that this would be something that would sway somebody who is an agnostic atheist to believing if they could actually see a demonstration of something like that.
Because
why
we're all very open, but it would take evidence, not just a feel-good feeling in our bosom.
Absolutely.
So why is that not available to people now?
I don't know. That's probably one of my biggest. I guess criticism would be the right word. But among the spiritual gifts that were common in the early days of the New Testament, among the spiritual gifts which were common during Joseph Smith's days, they're very uncommon. I know I've had throughout my life numerous different times where I felt a powerful spiritual connection, filled me with the spirit of love, gave me insight to myself and others that brought about great benefit, even to the gift of tongues, being able to speak Spanish fluently when I had never learned it prior to that. And I never doubted the source that it came from. I look at the benefits to those there. But in other words, why don't our prophets and apostles have the ability to use seer stones and gain revelations and speak, thus saith the Lord?
Or even just your because, I mean, okay, and we're going really fast, and we should probably slow down a little bit. But, I mean, you have the Melchizedek priesthood, and to talk about the levels of the priesthood, when you're younger, you can get the Aaronic priesthood at age 12, I believe. And that's supposed to be the priesthood that was talked about in the Bible in the Old Testament, right?
Yes.
And then the Melchizedek priesthood is a higher form of priesthood, but it gives you a lot of the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Is that correct?
It's supposed to. Most people don't even really apply to those gifts.
Okay. And I mean, why wouldn't somebody with the Melchizedek priesthood, which is the restored priesthood of essentially it gives you some of the powers of Jesus Christ or that Jesus Christ had, why couldn't somebody with the Melchizedek priesthood do stuff like that? Because if like there was that sort of thing happening,
I would say they certainly can, and I have people in my family who have manifested those same kind of spiritual gifts. I will say that it's not common.
Okay, but I mean, there's a huge jump from saying I can speak a second language to I can translate things that are not translatable. Like I mean, there's a huge jump in proof of evidence.
Well. Even saying that you can speak another language and you know the source of it is a big jump. But like I think Josh's point is, even if we granted that, then you still have all your work ahead of you to go that extra leap.
And I feel like, see, for me, I understand where you're coming from. I want to see the evidence, but that's never been how people have talked as far as trying to persuade somebody to proselyte to somebody.
But is that a good thing?
Yeah. In my humble opinion, it certainly is. One of the instances that I refer to, in the early days of the apostles' time, one of the early converts to the church, his name is Justin Martyr, and he was somebody who was trained in the schools of philosophy, very educated himself, knew how to debate and show people's logical fallacies. He saw a street meeting taking place. I think this is Jerusalem area. Maybe I'm getting it wrong. But among the couple of people that were holding this street meeting of sorts, they're bearing their testimony, and you've got somebody who's obviously been trained in the rhetorical schools and the debate schools. Why is a gnat as small as it is have wings, yet an elephant as big as it is, it doesn't have these kind of questions where he can trip somebody up. And finally, the old man turned to him and said, "Sir, we could answer your questions well enough if you were after seeking the truth. But we are here members of your community, and we are bearing witness to what we have seen and what we have heard." And they bore their witness of the resurrected Jesus Christ. And always, it's been a matter of, we're witnesses to this that has taken place. And people would have to be in tune. I think of what's recorded regarding Thomas, known as Doubting Thomas, to where I'm not going to see it till I believe it. And he had the humbling experience to where the resurrected Jesus Christ said, "Thomas." He fell at his feet and said, "My Lord and my God." And he let them know, hey, blessed are you, whatever the language really is, because we just get the anglicized version of it. "Blessed art thou, Thomas, because you have seen me and you've believed. More blessed are those who have not seen me and yet believe." And let me finish this last point,
Okay.
because as far as the standard of truth that we put out, the evidences that I would put to others, I would say, as I've lived as faithfully as I can and still trying to improve my life, I feel an overwhelming desire to not only be better, but reach out to others. Being in Salt Lake City right now and seeing the homeless on the street, I cannot help be filled with, if I were truly in the image of Jesus Christ, I would be able to go out and minister to them and help people right now. But I don't know how to do it, and I feel somewhat ashamed of myself that I can't, because I recognize this is what the Savior would be doing. He would be with them right now.
But I don't see how you can say that's evidence. To have this urge or feeling to do good, I have that same feeling. Muslims have that same feeling. How can you claim that is evidence?
Yeah, well, is some other things that could be looked at. Hey, are these people on the right path on anything? On their construction methods, their agriculture methods, or anything else? Well, they produce pretty amazing stuff. They've obviously got something going on right, and people realize, oh, when they've gone away from the hunter-gatherer and started planting crops and these methods and became more mechanized about it, they realize, oh, a lot more people get fed, they prosper a lot more, and the evidence is of it. Now they have more time available to develop other stuff. So there's those sort of things on non-religious stuff. I take a look at the changes in my father's life. My grandma was in an even more abusive home there in Monterrey, Mexico, and the changes that happened there and the stability that's been since then. In other words, I would present to people, hey, not only have I had personal witnesses regarding Jesus Christ, regarding the purpose of this life, what we're to accomplish, and what's happening afterwards, I offer you as evidence. This is the changes that you've seen in my heart. Hopefully you can feel it from me.
Okay, so I'll just add this. I see that as simply anecdotal.
Yes.
And I can give the exact opposite anecdotal argument, because my mom was raised Mormon in a FLDS family, and her upbringing was extremely violent
and shitty.
And
Very
then
shitty.
as she left Mormonism, her life has gained happiness. So I just see that as simply an anecdotal argument. It doesn't sway me in any way, and I'm not trying to insult
But I understand.
your view.
Well, and not only that, but I am. It makes me happy. I don't even know your mom, but I know you guys a little bit, and I already like you guys, and it makes me happy that she found happiness. It does, and I would hope that even more would happen. I'm convinced that this life is not the end of much of anything, but that even people who feel like I've served my whole life and I'm filled with this wisdom and I'm this great, wise, powerful oak tree, oh, you're going to find out you're nothing more than a seedling ready to grow some more.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump in. I thought you were done with your thought.
But it was a good one, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
This nice poetic flow, and then Josh.
Yeah. Well, no. So it sounded like you had more to say. So I started to say something and then stopped. But so let's move on. I think there was a touching point. I do want to at least get some of the.
Well, let me give one last thought. In other words, I don't fault you guys for saying I'm not persuaded by that. That's fine. I wouldn't expect you to be. But those that I know of...
What do you mean by that, though? You wouldn't expect me.
Wouldn't expect... In other words, hey, I want something more than that. I don't expect that, hey, just because I'm here and I bear what you guys... I would hope you would feel as a sincere testimony for me. I don't feel like... Well, I expect you to be converted now. I don't.
Yeah,
But
I feel like it was deeply sincere.
Yeah, but here's what I would hope. As I make friends... Because I know I felt it throughout my life, especially since my teenage years and beyond... Be friends to everybody. That was even part of my patriarchal blessing, to where your Heavenly Father expects you to be friends with everyone. Be a friend who's willing to give of oneself, and I naturally feel that. I would hope, hey, we got to spend enough time, perhaps, and again, because I would never force you to do anything. I would never force anybody. That's one of the fundamental core beliefs: is people get to choose for themselves. Mm-hmm. Maybe there would be a time to where, hey, Jacob, you talked about this before. I've got a question. And you would hopefully feel comfortable with me enough where maybe I've got something more to offer you. And even then, I recognize, oh, there I am, Mr. Missionary. No, I would first and foremost, am I living my religion? Do I have a personal conviction myself? Am I living in a way where other people would feel a connection to it? And that would be, hopefully, what would bring others on board. But even if right now, if we got the Book of Mormon, we got the gold plates right here, bam! I wouldn't expect anybody to, well, I guess I'll be baptized now.
I'd be very
Is
skeptical.
it time to pour this out? But then I would expect that skepticism because I think that's natural and that's good.
Yeah. Because then Allah or Muhammad's going to walk in with
Yeah.
the hadith and throw that
But
on
in
the
other
table
words,
as well.
hopefully the spiritual gifts and benefits that I would say, hey, I felt these throughout my life. I've seen them throughout my life. Other people may want to be a part of it. And when you guys are describing a very abusive relationship, a crappy relationship that you guys grew up in and you felt like you were being put in trouble just for having sincere questions, well, I feel like I don't want to be a part of that. I'm glad that you're not a part of that anymore.
All right, so because every time I try to preempt this question, it gets cut off. Are Mormons Christian?
Yeah.
Okay, and would you mind explaining? Because I hear from a lot of Christians that Mormons
are not
Yeah.
Christian.
No
Well-
true Christian.
And here's because I've been told that from as early as I've been able to understand what a Christian is, which is basically my teenage years. I've been told that same thing emphatically by others, and I don't. In my humble opinion, I don't know any other group of people that I've ever been associated with who have what I recognize as a more sincere testimony of Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior than the members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And you guys know that there's crappy ones out there. There's also a lot of good ones that are wonderful, sincere people.
Wait,
I met a lot of
you mean you don't?
Baptists who were
Yeah.
exactly the same. Actually, I think I met more Baptists who I felt were more sincere about their Christianity than most Mormons that I met.
You mean you don't pray to Joseph Smith though?
Not anymore. No.
That's the one I get all the time.
I've heard that a lot, and it's so funny because if you are a believer in Christ, then you're a Christian. It's simple.
Yeah, and that should really be the only thing. Well, and it's the
Yeah.
role of Jesus Christ. So I would have a hard time saying that a Muslim is Christian because they believe that Jesus Christ existed. And was
Well, I mean, a
teacher.
believer in Jesus Christ
As a prophet.
as the Son of God.
and yeah.
In other words, the central point. In other words, salvation hinges upon the reality of His atonement.
Yes, I think that would be the one that qualifies you as a Christian. All right, and then moving forward, because everybody is always fascinated by the magic Mormon underwear. So let's talk about that for 2 seconds. I mean,
I'm
it's just-
wearing them right now.
I remember Dad walking around in his. I'm like, what the hell?
But garments are simply just an expression of your belief, or how do you feel?
I feel like there's more than that. So here's a little bit more about myself. So here I am, returned missionary, fireball missionary, and I'm teaching seminary, and I'm teaching Sunday school, and I even recently got a new calling as 20-something years old. New calling as the primary chorister. How freaking awesome is that? Leading the music for the little kids, beautiful voices. Get to share with them my testimony at the end of it. My wife, who was my stake president's daughter, she was my sweetheart before my mission, she left me. And I reached out to my bishop and my stake president, my papa-in-law, said, hey, please help me save my marriage. I want to save my marriage, my temple marriage. And my bishop couldn't do much of anything because my wife didn't want to talk to him at all. My papa-in-law wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And I felt completely abandoned. I went through depression for the first time in my life, and you guys can tell I'm a pretty positive person. And that's my natural default state. I'm a pretty enjoying life type of person. Man, the darkness that surrounded me at that time, it was after moving away from Southern California, right after my divorce. I had read the Book of Mormon already 3 times cover to cover that year because I'm trying to double and triple down on my spiritual efforts to deal with this darkness that I felt wanted to swallow me. When I moved up to Oregon, I lived only about a 10-minute drive from the Portland Temple. And I figured, well, I don't have to work or do anything until noon. If I just wake up a little bit earlier, I can do a session at the temple before I go. And then the next day I realized, well, I really don't have anything else going on. Let me just wake up earlier and let me go again. Following day, I realized, you know what? If I wake up this much earlier, I can do 2 sessions before I have any other obligations. And I had an extended period of time in my life when I was able to attend the temple doing almost exclusively endowment sessions for numerous months in a row. In other words, the endowment session I probably went through a couple hundred times or more within a few short months. And it was during that time I felt the Book of Mormon for the first time in my life. Having read it dozens of times previously, I had it opened up to me like never before. I had my patriarchal blessing opened up to me like never before. and I felt strong impressions regarding what my Heavenly Father wants from me during my life. So the Mormon underwear, well, I'd been wearing them already my whole life. I paid a lot more attention to the meaning of it. I felt a very strong personal connection with my Maker. I felt like, hey, there's things you need to learn. This is part of the process of you learning this. But as far as I wear them sincerely and think about the promises that I've made and how I'm going to live my life because of that.
Are they supposed to protect you from anything? Or do they act as a I remember hearing my dad say they act as a shield or some sort. Like if someone tried to stab him, the garments would protect him. Or...
Well, I know people who have been stabbed and shot while wearing garments and have died. Members of law enforcement that I know that have lost their lives. I've been taught that. Luckily, I've never been in a position where I've needed that. I do feel a sense of respect towards it, where I don't treat it like regular underwear lying on the floor. I try to make sure, hey, put these on. To me, those same things. It's a protection. It's a shield. In as much as you do not defile it. Yep, I've been taught that from as soon as I learned about the temple.
So I know, like you said, some people have been shot and died wearing them. So you know,
and other people express miraculous stories, and
yes.
and I think wonderful. Luckily I haven't needed any of those miracles.
So in those miraculous stories, do you think the garments actually did something, or do you think wearing the garments there is that possibility that something miraculous could happen?
It could be. The reason, because I've never been through it, I can't speak to it. But here's what I would think. Let's say that somebody is a child raised in a made-up religion. Let's just say that. Let's say you could apply that to Mormons. but let's say you got a kid who's raised in that, but he's shown, hey, if you wear this, this is what it means. Here's how you're going to live because of this. We're putting these symbols on here, so this will be fresh inside of your mind, so you'll think about this and looking out for others. They may simply be more aware and looking out for experiences along what they've been taught, and I would feel like that's sincere. I would even be open to God working through people who try to keep their mind focused on doing well unto others. So no, I'm not going to ascribe Mormon underwear protects you from fire damage or anything like that, but I'm open to it. I think where I place a lot of emphasis, where I think there's a lot of value, is the sincerity of people, especially when it's the kind of sincerity towards things that make connection with others and build others up.
Yeah.
Well, I think social interaction is very important for our species, and I think that's a necessity, granted, whether you're religious or not. But yes, I do agree with you on that.
So to move along, I think this is a great one that Josh put on our little list. The church's stance on race, past versus present. And I think that's a great one to discuss. As we all know, I'm sure African Americans were not allowed to hold the priesthood, and there's certain things written in the Book of Mormon talking about like white and delightsome and those sort of things.
And I want to kind of give some more background too. So there, in my mind, when it comes to race, there have been three distinct periods. One was when LDS people under Brigham Young and moving forward for a while didn't want any black members at all, and then there was the time that black people were allowed to become members of the church but not priesthood holders, and then afterwards they're now able to become full priesthood holders, and the church has since said, hey, we're saying that all of the stuff that we said on race in the past, we're denying it, not denying that they said it, but we're saying that that's not policy anymore, and I also heard that it's because of the Cain and Abel story, which is kind of fascinating, right? So Cain and Abel, Cain was marked with a mark, and I think it was Brigham Young who said that mark is the blackness, or being black. And that was.
Let me take it a step further. So not only that, Brigham Young, Journal of Discourses, Volume 10. If you just look that up online, you'll probably find a PDF version of it, and you can do a Control F search for the word African. And Brigham Young spells out very specifically, would you like to know, shall I tell you of God's law concerning the African race? It is that if any white person of the blessed race, something to that effect, mixes his seed with Cain's seed in the African people, they should both be killed on the spot. It shall always be so. And I might have one or two words different there, but that is the substance of it. And it bothers me
It's disgusting.
Well, here's what bothers me. It bothers me that the church will deny that. I've simply stopped asking anybody inside of a church educational system sort of setting any of those questions because I just see a tap dance, or else the little bit that I've asked, I've been met with, well, you insinuations that you must not be faithful, and I feel like, forget you.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be so judgmental.
That's not what it says.
But I find myself very bothersome. In other words, it is undeniable that Brigham Young, in settings where he expects to be treated and received as a prophet of God, says that very clearly.
So do you not think that was from God?
I don't believe so. No. And here's what I would want. If it were me in Brigham Young's time and I get to have him on the podcast, I would say, you teach that this is a law from God. How do you know such laws? And what I'm curious about, are you extrapolating from your interpretation of the Old Testament, or are you saying that you've had an experience like unto Nephi and Lehi, where an angel of God gave you a guided tour and taught you things specifically?
He would probably say that.
Maybe he would, and I would take that into consideration at that point. The church's stance, if you were to go to LDS.org and type in essay on race, one of the first links, if not the first link that pops up, about a 75-page essay regarding the church's history regarding race. And they fall back on, we cannot trace where that supposed revelation that Brigham Young refers to is contained. And so because of that, they say it's not doctrinal because we can't find where it started, even though in Joseph Smith's day, at least 2 black members from African descent were ordained to the priesthood, and it was stopped shortly thereafter.
Yeah, and that's why I said starting with Brigham Young, because I know that Joseph Smith was not as racist. I know that I think he may have been a victim of the time, and I don't know. I have no evidence on that. But Brigham Young was definitely racist.
I don't mean this insulting, Jacob, but it's what I said earlier. Whenever there's something disgusting, because that's disgusting in there, just like in the Old Testament, when I discuss things with Mormons or of many other religions, they excuse that and say that's not God's word or that's a mistake. But then everything else, it's cherry picking at its finest.
That's not even my position. I feel like I don't know. Yeah. And Brigham Young doesn't declare what the source of his knowledge is. So, but I know for me. So here's me. I take that in consideration. I have a black sister. Not only that, I feel like I don't want to call her my sister-in-law because I don't feel like, okay, you're my sister because of a legal. No, my wonderful Peruvian wife, my wonderful Dominican sister, obviously of African descent, my wonderful sister from Sinaloa, Mexico, my other one from the Philippines, as well as my natural-born sister. I love them. And in my family, what we've been taught, even me being raised in a small redneck town, my dad being born into a logging community in Montana, you would think that those would be prime conditions, kind of feel like, well, this is our people.
Yeah.
I've never.
We don't like your.
It's like my family is like, it doesn't matter.
See, and I do not think you're racist at all.
But
definitely not.
But in other words, I am open. Okay, Brigham, if you got this law from God, I would love to pick your brains. Share with me how that works, because my default position is to feel like you're talking out of your ass.
So, if he did get that from God, and God exists, we're granting all these, would you disagree with God, or would you accept that and try and? I don't see how that could be rationalized. That's a good statement.
Let me deal with the idea of like, would you accept it? Would you do this? There's lots of church history to where things that Joseph Smith taught, which are not from the New Testament, where Joseph Smith says, "I got a connection from on high. I'm going to give you more of the great plan," and lots of people had a very difficult time with it. And over again, it's a matter of, okay, let me contemplate, let me meditate. And usually there's something that happened to where, okay, I'm feeling an impression. I'm feeling an embrace and acceptance of this doctrine that I haven't heard before. So I'm open to the idea to where if God wanted me to take some sort of action on it, hopefully he would soften up my heart enough. But here's the things that I recognize over and over again. I remember I mentioned that going through a divorce, man, that ripped my guts out. I felt myself more inclined to anger. Very much so. I wanted to get in fights. I was actually looking for fights. To anger and hostility. And I recognize, hey, that's going to eat me up. That's going to destroy me. I got to really pay attention. What's going to make it so I let things go. I don't internalize it. I let things go. And then I would feel more love towards others build up inside of me. I recognize if God's going to give me a message, if I'm recognizing something that leads me towards violence about killing people because of interracial intercourse, yeah, I would have a serious time. And in fact, I cannot foresee any circumstance where I would have anything but the desire to kill those who want to kill others.
So you're more...
In other words, I would view it as an act of defense. You're going to kill people because of interracial marriage. This is lawful defense right here.
Yeah.
You're not going to intervene.
You are more moral than your God, just like most Christians.
You know what? And I think now I'm not somebody who believes, well, God's speaking to Brigham Young, and he obviously pulled out his pen and paper at the time. No, I believe that I know in my own life things that I've come to know and understand, things that I don't share with others. I felt like it developed over time, and I feel like, no, I feel a clarity, I feel a confidence, and there's certain settings when I would share stuff with others. So I don't know how it worked for Brigham Young or Joseph Smith, but you guys already know I got serious problems with what he was sharing.
Yeah, and I understand what you're talking about there. And I understand that you attribute that to God and your religion, your spirituality and everything. But I have gone through the exact same motions and the exact same, not the exact same issues. Granted, I've had a lot of issues in my life growing up, and into my teens and into my 20s and so on. But I have been to the same points that you have been. Mad, really mad, wanting to, picking fights wherever I was, talking shit to whoever, just to do it. And just wanting to hit someone in the face, and talking shit to where someone would make a move so I could hit him in the face.
So violent.
But listening to metal, I love heavy metal. Even to this day, I still love heavy metal. And but I had a lot of issues. But I've come to the same realizations. Being angry is a waste of time.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be angry. How much time do I have on this planet? This is probably my own. I pretty much believe this is my only life. This is the only time I got. I don't want to waste it being pissed off. But I've come to the same realizations, but I don't attribute that to anything supernatural or anything like that. And I know a lot of people have certain views and ideas in this world, and a lot of them are wrong. A lot of them are, like with Brigham Young's little stance on there on
kill people who are mixing races.
Yeah, that's just the stupidest. The more I learn about Brigham Young, the more he's a distant relative of ours, and I want to kick him in his nuts.
I like Brigham Young. Now, on something like that, that I certainly don't accept it. I don't want to just outright say that's heresy, but even though I lean right towards there.
Well, if he was here right now, I'd give him an earful. Okay, I would, and he would not like it.
Well, and here's another thing that I try to take into perspective on most things, whether it's religious, whether it's political, things like that.
Yeah.
I don't want to attribute something that I clearly reject with that just makes them a bad person.
Yeah.
Because there's most of what I know about Brigham Young, I admire him. I like the guy. I did invite him over. Maybe it's a product of his time. In other words, I don't have to be his advocate or anything else.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like any need to defend it, but it bothers me that people pretend like he doesn't make those sort of comments, that those aren't his stances, and that he did so in settings where he expect to be treated as if he's the Lord's mouthpiece at the time.
Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you two more questions, and then maybe we should move on to another topic. So the first one's a yes or no question. Mm-hmm. Do you believe God spoke to Brigham Young, or that he received revelation and he wrote down things that God was communicating?
Let me go to that second part where you said, do you believe that he received revelation, wrote down the impressions? Yes.
Yes. Okay. So with that said...
But in other words, spoke to God. I don't know of Brigham Young making any claims like the ones that are in the Book of Mormon where different prophets will say, Jesus spoke to me as a man speaks to his friend. Now, I've sought for those experiences in my life, and I've had other things that I felt an incredible connection, but not like that. I don't know of Brigham Young ever making that claim, but I know that Brigham Young, as well as those after him, certainly had impressions that they wrote down that they believe this is God's will for the people we are leading.
I got something. Sorry.
I have a second question.
Oh, yeah.
So if he possibly did receive some sort of feeling from God or whatnot,
Revelation,
then why do you think God would give him some information, but then allow for him to say racist shit and write that down?
Yeah, pretty much the idea of allowing people, and that comes to just the what I find to be the core teaching, the fundamental principle of the gospel. Not only is it the Savior Jesus Christ and the atonement making salvation possible, but us having the ability to choose before that.
See, but, okay, if I was an all-powerful God, educating somebody on the existence of said God does not take away their choice. It's simply education. So,
If the Christian God came here,
in other words, can a prophet be
So-
completely off on some stuff? Yeah,
so-
yeah, absolutely.
the fact that if I'm an all-powerful God and I have this guy who's spreading my word and I allow him to say racist, horrible things, but I am trying to spread my true message, I wouldn't do that. And it's not a fact of stopping him or taking away his choice or taking away people's choices that hear this message. But I don't know. It just seems like a God that hasn't really thought things through.
Well, or maybe it's a God that does not take that direct action in controlling anybody.
But he does if you read the Bible. I mean, he takes a lot of direct action.
and
He killed everybody with a flood, supposedly.
Well, even in that, you've got people to where some people will take the position. I know it's more common in the Baptist faith to where this is God's word and that's it. And I realize, hey, I see through my lenses from today as much as I can. I know that as good of a person as Thomas S. Monson is, he is not somebody to where, at least he doesn't make this claim. God's given me this, and therefore you receive this. And I don't attribute entirely different circumstances to those of the Old Testament. This is as good as we know it. So as we're talking about selling off our daughters and as we're talking about slavery, this is the best we know at the time. And since God doesn't destroy us, clearly he must condone it. And I realize, okay,
I hate that argument.
They may be very limited people, and perhaps this is again me simply expressing my opinion. Perhaps it is much more evolutionary as far as people themselves going through the struggles that take thousands of years before all of a sudden you're now prepared to receive more. If you're going to become like the creators of eternities and universes and sub-universes and other dimensions and no longer be subject to the space-time continuum, you got to start right here as a baby who needs a boob in his mouth and have to learn the lessons the hard way of what it's like to deal with anger, to deal with heartache, to love others and reach out to others. I tend to fall more along those lines that the Old Testament reflects the people of the time and doesn't reflect God's finger on every page.
He can tell them not to eat shellfish and tell them how much to sell your daughter for, but he can't tell them like owning other people is bad. I have trouble following that.
I honestly think that it's a morality issue for sure. I think we don't need religion for that. I think religion helps in certain ways, but it also makes things worse in certain ways. Just like the whole Brigham Young issue about, race. Whether or not Joseph Smith was racist, Brigham Young definitely was, sounding by that. I think the issue is here, the Mormon church pretty much followed along with certain race issues all the way up until the 70s, until Jimmy Carter threatened to take their tax-exempt status away from them. When a lot of the rest of the world was already past calling them, lesser people and stuff. We're all equal, all the same. And I do understand there's a difference between religions and religious people. I don't know. I forgot where I was going. I had a few things in my head, but then the conversation moves on and moves on and moves on.
Let me mention a little bit of something, because it's easy to pick those parts apart, and I make sure that I do not shy away from those discussions. But, But the way that the church entered Black Africa is you've got a man who had lost his brother years before, whose brother appeared to him in a dream and gave him a guided tour of a beautiful building, and he talked about the impressions that he had regarding it. It was later that he came across a magazine article that featured the Mormons with the temple there. That's what I was shown. And there was correspondence writing to this Brigham Young University, contact information, and congregations formed in Black Africa with only black members of the church, begging for years in a row, send us people that are authorized. We want to be in Christ's fold. And so, and I'm not going to make the claim, well, clearly you know that God's in charge. But for me, I receive it as, hey, there's wonderful blessings awaiting them. I don't know the reasons why, but I do not doubt that man's experiences.
I will say,
and even knowing others personally from El Salvador, multiple people that I've known from El Salvador for some reason have had similar type experiences that later translated into them receiving the gospel and going to the temple themselves.
I got a question that goes back a little bit. How do you separate the two between what Brigham Young has said regarding the happy fun times and what he said due to like racism and stuff like that? How do you separate the two, and how do you know it's different? How do you know God didn't give him the other stuff?
Yeah, I don't, and maybe that's something that I put up on the shelf. When I know that today I'm certainly not held accountable for what Brigham Young says.
Yeah.
It annoys me that that many people take the tactic of ignoring it or saying it's not the way that you hear it.
Yeah.
When it's a matter of, oh, you know what, I can Google search myself.
Yeah.
So that bothers me, but I realize I think the way that I separate it, I do feel a personal connection with my Maker. I do feel a sense of purpose. I do feel like there's more in store for me, and having a family right now is a part of that. And I feel like, hey, when I get to the other side, whatever's in store for me there, I'm going to be held accountable for the light and knowledge that I have, not the light and knowledge that Brigham Young had. Could
that special relationship that you claim you have with your God, could that be your own moral compass?
I think a lot of it is inspired by that. I've had friends that joined the church in their adult life, and they came from difficult circumstances, similar to some of the ones that you guys have expressed. I mean, not necessarily religious, but very difficult circumstances. And they had kind of an innate sort of moral compass already instilled within them. Even though if they were behaving like their parents, their lives would have been very difficult, would have been very different. But it made a wonderful transition into them having a family inside of the church. And these are, I'm thinking of one family in particular that has 5 wonderful daughters. And they went through, spiritual difficulties that ended up leading them to be sealed in the temple, and later they even ended up leaving the church and becoming Catholics. But as far as could it be my own mind, could it be my own moral compass? I think there's a lot, and this is me expressing my opinion, which is influenced by the teachings I have regarding the premortal life.
Yeah, and I mean something not attributed to a God. Could it be?
I'm not going to say no, because I really try to stay humble and say, well, recognize that there's stuff that you don't know.
Yeah.
I don't attribute that. In fact, I don't feel the slightest bit of doubt that I have a Maker interested in me and the way that I treat others and in accomplishing certain things in this life.
Okay, let's move on to the next topic. At least I think that's a good jumping off point. So you mentioned the premortal life. So there's 2 parts of Mormon theology, or cosmology is the philosophical term for it. So, and I think that these are fascinating, and people who listen are going to be fascinated by it. So there was a spiritual war in heaven prior to our existence. So we have, as I remember from Sunday school, at least 3 different phases in our lives, and potentially 4. We have the pre-existence, then we have our earthly life, then we have our afterlife, which is kind of broken up into 2 different spots, which is pre-judgment and post-judgment. Is that all accurate?
Yeah, that's a pretty good summary.
Okay, so let's talk about our pre-mortal lives. There's a lot there to tackle. So do we have a Heavenly Mother, I guess is a good starting point.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we have a Heavenly Father, Heavenly Mother, and God is who we call the Heavenly Father, and He's the one who we deal with, pray to,
and let me go back to the King Follett Discourse. And if anybody's listening to this is interested, it's not a particularly long discourse, but I love that one because this is a clear indication to where Joseph Smith isn't saying, I'm going to take some New Testament verses and just extrapolate my own thoughts what it means. I really felt like, hey, this is somebody who's been shown more on the subject, and we see how it ties in with other things that people have received in the New Testament. But some of the most powerful teachings I find inside of there, one of the favorite of anti-Mormon phrases is taken from the King Follett Discourse, as man is, God once was, And as God is, man may become. And he expounds inside of there the struggles that we go through right now. Some people with physical impairment. Some people are only live a couple hours, then they die. Other people go through incredible heartache. Other people are born into rich families and never learn struggle in their whole life. Joseph Smith is teaching God our Father had to go through this, and likely had to go through a whole bunch of this to be able to arrive at the point to where he himself is able to break the bands of death and secure resurrection on behalf of himself and others and be in his position, and that we're going through an eternal round of things. So yes, it's big, it's deep, but yes, a heavenly mother and a heavenly father, those are fundamental doctrines that I'm grateful separate the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from Protestant religions that are breakoffs of the Catholic Church.
Okay, so he had billions of spirit children, right?
Yeah.
And that's one for every person who is alive or will be alive or has ever lived.
Yeah.
And then and that would be 2/3 of the population because of the spirit
Well,
war.
probably a
1/3.
lot more than that. Let me share with you some of the things that caused me to reflect even more.
Okay.
Pearl of Great Price, Book of Moses. Joseph Smith says this is an inspired translation of the Book of Genesis, and Moses himself is receiving a celestial astrophysics lesson to where he himself and his body had to be translated. He's no longer limited to one voice happening at a time in the kind of way that we're learning right now with each other having a discussion. But he's shown all the creations of God. He's showing all of the beings that ever lived, and he's only able to discern it because he's now in a different physical state to learn this. Huge, and he's seen it. And finally, when he comes back to his own physical body after seeing all this, his comment is, "For this cause I realize that man is nothing, which thing I had never supposed." And even after that humbling experience, I had no clue what the eternities are like. And I could only learn it for that brief amount of time when my body itself had to be changed. Now he's brought back. He has his encounter with Satan right afterwards. And even though he's like, man, it's nothing, I'd never supposed that, he's now filled with this amount of confidence. Who are you? I've been in the presence of my Maker, and I had to be translated for that to happen to me. I can look upon you with my regular eyes. You're darkness to me. And big drama plays out inside of there. So, in other words, what I'm saying is, I don't know. The translations of experiences of people that lived thousands of years ago who I believe did know, they're humbled by it. They realize these are lessons that can't be learned in our physical bodies right now. And the little bit we get to take with us, it lets us realize we're nothing in the grand scheme of things.
So I wanted to ask something. It's kind of off the topic, but you said it. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned how some people are born and die after a minute, and some people are born rich, and all these different scenarios. So do you believe that God is all-knowing, all-powerful, omnipresent, all of those things?
Yeah, and let me just mention, because I know you've brought up before what seems like, well, wouldn't God control things more? Wouldn't he not allow things to happen? I believe there's much less direct control. In fact, I fall on the side of there's little to no direct control because it's us that are being tested, not God.
Well, I mean, and that's fine, but if he was all-knowing, all-power, and omnipresent, I don't know if you remember J.C. Lee Duggard. She was kidnapped at 11 and lived in a tent in the backyard of somebody for 18 years. He raped her every day. Wow. She had kids, and then she was often raped in front of her kids. If I was God, I'm sorry, but I wouldn't allow that to happen. Or here's another scenario. So when somebody is raping a child, molesting a child, your God is either saying, go ahead and rape that kid and I'll punish you when you're done, or they're saying that kid deserves to be raped. Or, I mean, if I had the right, and this is a Tracy Harris quote, if I had the capability to stop a child from being raped, I would do it. So I find that if your God is all-knowing, all-powerful, omnipresent, do you see that he is allowing children to be raped and molested?
Yeah.
Okay. Simple answer. That's
yeah.
good.
And in other words, among the things that I felt a strong spiritual connection with as I read the New Testament, I learn about the suffering of Jesus Christ.
That's not really suffering.
But
it was for the weekend.
But let me pick this up. When among those who are moved by that, who feel similar to me, to where that the pains of the world had to be embraced. So in other words, Christianity hinges upon Jesus Christ's ability to feel all the pain that you felt, whether it's by sin, whether it's physical pains, whether it's illnesses, whether it's loss of family, to be able to take that on himself personally. And why wouldn't God intervene? And to me, I don't have any struggles with the idea to where that this life is not the end of it. That there and I know for me personally, the little bit of pain that I've gone through, and I do, even though it was painful for me, I had suicidal thoughts for the first time in my life, never had to deal with that, ever, and it shocked me that I did. I've received personal spiritual witnesses of my Heavenly Father and my Savior Jesus Christ concern for me personally. And I'm at least in a position in this life to where I can empathize with people better. So when I meet people who struggle, who haven't had the wonderful blessings in my life that I have, I naturally feel an inclination to reach out to others. I attribute that to my testimony of Jesus Christ and him already feeling what I felt and beyond, and my duty as a disciple of him to reach out to others suffering. But no, I don't have any struggles with the fact that there's horrifying things that happen because of people's personal choices, and I do not attribute that to God's choices.
I'll just end it with saying I have a huge problem with it because he's watching a child be molested when he can stop it and he won't.
My problem is here with all of this is empathy. You have empathy, and a lot of it came after your suicidal thoughts. It helped you connect with other people. I feel like Matt and I had empathy since we were young for other people because we understood struggles and stuff like that. God had to send down his son to learn empathy. I feel like that's a morality issue that he should have had from the get-go before he created beings, if he was real, or if I believe that he was real. But I think empathy is something you can have without religion. Some of the most...
Yep. Double thumbs up for me.
Yeah, some of the most secular countries in the world, some of the happiest countries some of the happiest, most empathetic countries, I would say, are more secular than none.
Yeah, the more religious a country, the worse they score on societal health factors.
But I understand. But
would you like to know how skeptical I am of religion in general? I doubt that any of you surpass me as far as religion in general.
Let's hear it. I would like to hear it. I want to know. I want to get, because not just as Mormon, I like you, Jacob. I want to know more about you.
Even if we hadn't had the religious discussions, we'd probably still be hanging out.
Yeah, no, man. I want to jam on guitar with you.
Before we end, we probably ought to bust out these guitars, you know.
Yeah.
But hit me with that question again. In other words, I was telling you about my skepticism of religion.
Your skepticism of religion, even when it comes to founders of religion, like Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, Jesus, or you know what I mean. The religion in general seems like an issue. Most of the time when I have a problem with religion in general, it's religion, not religious people, unless those religious people are trying to push their doctrine onto other people who do not agree with them.
Let me follow up on that thread right there. Pushing your religion upon others. We know that there's history out there, some religions even more so than others, to where we're going to be setting up an empire for more than 1,000 years and kill millions of people in the process.
Yeah.
Either you're going to acknowledge Allah right now, or bam, it's going to be hundreds of thousands later, millions of people slain. Your children are going to be born into a new religion. Oh, and now that's the only thing that they know.
Yeah, Crusades as well.
When I think of some of the lessons and warnings of the temple, and I'm not going to get specific inside of there, but I shared with you a little about when I was able to go to the temple every day. There were certain warnings inside of there that I felt like, oh my goodness, why has nobody ever taught me this before? Because I'm seeing lessons in what feels like high definition warning right now. where you've got Latter-day Saints. They should all know, every single one of them who's been to the temple, they should know, what is Satan's plan? I'm going to gather up the treasures of the earth. I'm going to buy up armies and navies. I'm going to get religious leaders, and I'm going to get political leaders, and I will reign with blood and horror across this whole place. This is mine! And yet you got Mormons that are like, all's well in Zion. Do your home teaching. It's matter. Do you see what's going on right now? If you've got a Latter-day Saint who has the lessons that they should have learned, you realize this war started before we were born. You and I had the ability to choose. We were not forced. It was a matter of, okay, I'm going to have to learn what pain and suffering is. I'm going to have to lose children. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to be a cripple. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be that. I'm going to have to go through this. And it's my choice. Okay, it's difficult. I got this other plan that's being presented over here. Son of the morning, Lucifer, he's one of the best and brightest. And he says, I'll take care of you all. You're not going to have to choose. You're not going to have to go through this suffering. You're not going to have to see children being raped. You're not going to have any of that. I will make sure all of you are saved. The glory is going to go to me, but I'm going to take care of you. You got housing. You got health care. You got everything else. Put the glory here. You're saved.
See, that sounds like theocracy to me, though. Taken away from...
Yeah,
because you think it's Satan's ideas.
Because, so this is Latter-day Saint doctrine. This is fundamental right here. We chose something else. We realized, okay, it's going to be difficult. We're going to have to walk by faith. We're going to have to choose on our own to do good because God's not going to intervene and do it unless we call upon and qualify for his intervention. And so when we're here... It's a matter of, no, we got to choose. We have to choose. That same war started there, and Satan and his followers don't have the limitation of 80 years of being an adult human. They don't have the limitations of, oh, now we got Google searches and things like that so we can learn about the past more. But it's a matter of, hey, I've seen what's happened on other worlds. I know at what point you're going to be easy to overthrow. I know how easy it's going to be to get the religious people and the political people to buy up these armies and navies and devastate and that control that I tried to establish in the premortal war. I'm trying to establish it right now. And so in other words, I believe most Latter-day Saints have no clue the import of the message that we teach.
Okay, and now...
Is that good enough?
I will say those are all assertions. I'll just throw that out there.
But if you want to know...
But I do agree with you at some point.
If you want to know what drives me, that's what drives me.
Yes.
Okay, so...
I feel like we can agree on some points of that, but...
I couldn't.
Agree to the whole separation of church and state.
Because
and
in other words,
issues like
the
that.
reason
Theocracy is bad, but the
always,
reasons why I think we disagree with.
I've always gotten along so well with my atheist and agnostic friends because I feel like I'm never going to force you. I would never let anybody try to put a gun or a sword to your head. In fact, I would organize and take up arms to prevent it.
Yeah.
If you want to be an atheist, it's up to you, man. Yeah. Hopefully you can feel enough love from me, and maybe you'll feel like I've got something more that I could give you something that would, if it doesn't bless your life, what worth is it for me to even offer it?
I will say I don't want to be an atheist. I didn't choose to be an atheist. I just wasn't convinced by the arguments.
But I won't. Yeah. I would never allow somebody else to try to force something else on you.
Yeah.
All right.
Which is good. I wouldn't allow it on you too, good sir.
All right. So we were talking about the premortal existence, and we went off on.
Oh, did you like it? I gave you the high definition premortal existence.
So, in Mormon theology, it's believed that we lived prior to this, and so you were talking about essentially Satan's workers who are the 1/3 of people who didn't choose Jesus' plan. Would you kind of extrapolate on that?
Well, so the details are not all that clear, and I spent a lot of time trying to understand this. So from Joseph Smith's days, it's taught that there was a council held in heaven, and among the Father presented a plan. You're going to go down to earth. You're going to be tested. All of you will make mistakes. You will be dependent upon a Savior to overcome that and continue in your eternal progression. And one stepped forward and said, I'll provide myself as that Savior. And we became born into the earth as Jesus Christ. Another plan was presented where it said, hey, we're not going to follow the Father's plan. I got a better one to where nobody is going to be lost. They're not going to have the choice to choose from themselves because of those bad choices that they're guaranteed to make. Let the glory go to me, and let's do this instead. The Father said, we will not take that other plan. And Lucifer, with whatever sermons he taught, was able to influence 1/3 of all those who were then denied the ability to receive a physical body and continue in their progression, and they come down here to Earth without many of the limitations that to their minds and their memories, but they do not have physical bodies.
How would he not give the people a choice?
There was the choice. It's a matter of, hey, if you want to continue...
No, you mean Satan, right?
Satan. Oh,
let's not give these people a choice.
In other words, I don't know how. So, and here's some of the thoughts that have popped into my head. Maybe it's a matter of, okay, Adam and Eve, you're now born inside of here. I've already got the knowledge that's from thousands of years down the road, how we can do cloning or whatever else, whatever. But it's the process of getting spirit children of God into bodies down here. I don't know what it would have been. Some of those ideas pop into my mind just because we're at an amazing time in history to where we got nearly the world's entire library on a screen right in front of us right now, or right inside of our pockets. We watch cat videos instead. But,
and Nikola Tesla prophesized for that.
We can't even imagine the technology that's going to be just 100 years down the road. In other words, some alive today will see technology that no matter how hard we tried to write the most fantasy science fiction novel, we can't imagine it. And I realize, okay, so Satan and his followers, they aren't limited to what we are. They've seen it happen on other worlds. One of the lessons of the temple that people just ignore. I find the temple endowment incredibly enriching. But let me share this. So when Satan's confronted, what are you doing here? The same has been done in other worlds. And in other words, he's declaring right there, I know how this works. I got insight that these people don't have. That's why it makes it easy for me to manipulate them.
Okay, so Joe, did you have a question?
Oh, yeah, I lost it.
Okay, so let me move forward.
I do that.
I'm so bad.
Do that.
I'm bad at that.
It's because I'm on my second ginger beer, non-alcoholic, I promise, pure cane sugar. That's what it is.
No, I liked it. It tastes good, but it just doesn't have alcohol.
All right, so let's move forward. Because and we're gonna. This life is a trial, as understood by the church. So
it is tasty, though.
When you say on other worlds, I'm interested in you extrapolating on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
It does kind of remind me of Xenu and Scientology.
In other words, Joseph Smith taught from the founding of the church, taught that this isn't all there is to it. In other words, lots of Christian faiths will have difficulty with the Mormons saying, "What do you mean, other people on other planets? If there are other gods?" And from the get-go, it's a matter of, this is eternal. We're not limited to this speck inside of our known universe. And so, no, it's very easy. In fact, it would be difficult for me to take the position to where there's a lot more that we don't know about than what we do. We're on a tiny speck in the universe. People would never even take note of us. But for some reason, we've got an almighty creator that I feel a connection with, that I feel personally loved by, that I feel personal responsibility in my life to progress. But no, I'm convinced, and Joseph Smith taught from his earliest, from the foundation of the church, that there's eternities more that we do not understand and have not seen yet.
I feel like you're a good person. I feel like you have a lot of
Well, I'm not.
really good ideas, and I feel like your empathy is strong, and I just feel like, because I feel like we can agree on a lot of things, especially theocracy and issues like that. I want to know if you could have possibly admit or maybe realize that you could have reached all of these same ideas without having a doctrine.
No.
You don't think you could have?
I don't. And now, here's what I will.
I think you could have.
Here's what I'll concede. I realize I could have come to a lot of good without religion.
Yeah.
There's certain things that I feel that have built me up past the point of my natural abilities that I wouldn't have achieved without connection with my Maker, without the priesthood that I hold, without me taking it seriously, without me trying to live my life. So that part I feel, and I am acknowledging to where I don't know in the sense that I can foresee the future, that I've seen alternate timelines as depicted in Star Trek. I haven't seen any of that, but I know how I feel. I'm grateful for what I have. I'm grateful that I don't feel a need to control you or anything else. In other words, not only am I comfortable, but I embrace you guys for your differences. And I would simply hope, hey, do I have something to offer? Would these conversations lead to more in the future that would make you happier?
I would love to have you on again.
I'm happier just by being associated with you.
We are going to have him on again. But let's so we're going to have him
move on though.
For a
You
debate.
better be an angrier traffic cop. Bam! I placed that burden upon you, Josh. You say, listen, Buster, we're going down this road.
Okay, so Matt, you had something you wanted to
Yes, so I have a question for you, a couple questions, and I always ask whenever I'm...
Can we hold off until the end? I have one more topic that I want to stay on point
Ooh,
on, and
do it.
and then we'll get there.
Get
I
your
wanted to talk
Josh,
about
get your taser.
Reformed Egyptian for a minute too.
We're all flinging...
Okay, so this is the last thing. Then we'll go Reformed Egyptian, and then any loose questions that we have.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so the last part is.
I want to let you know that this is really good. By the way, I'm getting a good burn.
Oh yeah, I like this stuff.
Yeah.
Let's get on to the actual questions. Okay, so the afterlife is also a fascinating subject for a lot of people. So in Mormon theology, from Sunday school, the best of my memory, there's 4 kingdoms that we can go to after we get sorted. We go to spirit prison and spirit paradise immediately after. And if you have the truth, you go to spirit paradise, and if you don't, you end up in spirit prison, where you can be preached to by Mormon missionaries still. And then after that phase, there's judgment. So Jesus Christ judges everybody, or helps us to judge ourselves, or something like that. It's been dependent on which Sunday school teacher I've had. And then the final phase is that we get sorted into the 4 kingdoms, the telestial, terrestrial, and then celestial. And celestial has actually, sorry, I say 4, but it's actually more like 6. And then in the celestial kingdom, there's different levels of salvation there.
There's like 3, right?
Yep. And then also there's outer darkness, which is where Satan and his followers will go to, as well as maybe Cain and Judas. But,
is it peaceful? Can you sleep out there?
In outer darkness, it may be non-existence.
Oh.
Okay, so and the more fascinating part is that in the celestial kingdom, the 3 different levels, the highest glory, you become a god. Is that correct?
Yeah, as far as I understand.
What does that mean to you?
Well, now, the way that you've described it seems like a lot of Sunday school teachers that I've also have, to where they got their limited knowledge and maybe they're just pulling out their lesson manual and doing as best they can. For me, I've contemplated on things more than most Mormons, and I don't want to say it in a way to where I sound arrogant, but I think you guys know that I pay more attention to my religion than most members of it. Becoming gods, as I've studied that subject, the 2 words that pop into my head are eternal progression, to where it's not something to where, bam, you paid enough tithing, guess what? And you're there. No, I feel like the same way that if we want to become elite at something, like brain surgery or somebody who is a special forces guru, there's a lot of sacrifice to be made in this earthly life to get to that point. And I feel like, okay, if you're going to get to the point to where all of a sudden you're a part of creation, you're no longer subject by the space-time continuum or however it works, that there's a lot of progress that's going to be required after this life. So yes, there's salvation, but what I view, and this is taught by Joseph Smith from the get-go as well, is to where there's progression that goes on forever. Yes, we can break it down in Sunday school diagrams and missionaries teaching people there at their homes with circles and things like that, but I'm convinced that it's not as simple as that. I won't share the experiences. Maybe if we have a conversation with my papa sometime, he has had multiple experiences on the other side where he's seen family members. One of them who went to war in Vietnam, and I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but he had himself surrounded by darkness, and he was pretty much crumpled in onto himself, and incapable of even acknowledging that there was anything beyond the darkness which he had surrounding him. He had other experiences to where it was more observational instead of, you've got a guided tour from an angel. Let me share with you what's happening. He's left with, my papa's left with more questions than answers, but he's recognized, hey, this is a different experience than the kind of dreams that normally happen. This is very different. So I don't know. I know that throughout Mormon history, there's many people who have had similar experiences, and it's not necessarily for the sake of, great, now go teach others.
And just to clarify, do you mean when you say your father has had those experiences, do you mean he had near-death experiences, or these happened during dreams?
Yeah, dreams.
Okay.
So I want to throw in a question, and I always ask this question to believers, no matter the religion, and depending on the dogma that they ascribe to, apostasy or being an atheist is the one unforgivable sin which will send you to hell or outer darkness. And I want to see where you fall and what you believe, Jacob.
I'll kick you down in that pit. No, now here's what I've always felt, and I've heard this taught as well, where the level of sincerity of people, we're judged by the light and knowledge that we have, and you guys have already shared. This is my progression. This is what I've gone through. This is what I've contemplated, and I'm trying to do the best that I can. This is the route that I've taken. Why would you ever be condemned for that? Now, that is something different to where, you've paid the prices here for the lessons that are available next. And I would break this down to earthly terms a little bit. If I were to sign up for an advanced calculus course, I barely made it through. I made it through my pre-calculus with an A. I did. But that was years ago.
Doing algebra right now.
And I am not brought up to the level to where I would receive much benefit from that kind of course. So that's something earthly we can understand. I would figure if there's lessons that have to do with, hey, here's what's beyond this life, here's the things that you would never learn here, there's certain things that we would need to do in this life to be prepared for that. I feel I feel strongly that the kind of love and empathy that you guys have placed so much emphasis on is one of those essential lessons. I believe there's more than that. So I'll fall on, I don't know, but that's what seems to make the most sense. And I feel a certain level of confidence with that.
I have a qualm because a lot of people feel certain levels of confidence that probably match your own or maybe even stronger than your own. That would feel completely different than you, who would rather just cut mine and Matt's and Josh's heads clean off.
Yeah.
You know, and
if they show up at the door, call me and I'll do what I can.
How do you tell the difference? That's a big issue with me. How do I tell the difference between fundamentalism, whether it's Mormonism or Islam,
is somebody willing to use violence to force it on you?
Okay, well, let's actually back up. Let's not make it that extreme.
I want to tackle that and let's go on to something. If somebody is willing to use violence to force it upon you, reject it. That's filthy.
But that's all over the Bible.
Okay,
yeah.
But I will say, we don't even, like Josh is saying, we don't even have to go that far.
Yeah.
A lot of Christians believe if you are an atheist and you're not a follower of Christ, you're going to hell.
But Mormons are different, and so
I know they are different.
To account for a different belief is
yes, weird. But they are followers of the Bible. And does the Book of Mormon say anything specifically about apostates?
No, not as far as the condition after here. There's some stuff that could be. People would make those inferences, but no, nothing specific like that.
Okay, and I've heard something about like the highest level I can ever achieve without the church would be telestial because I had the Aaronic priesthood. So I mean that's one thing that's kind of weird to me because I as genuinely don't lack a belief in a God as Matt and Joe do, but they could go to the terrestrial kingdom because they were not baptized into the actual LDS church, but the FLDS church. So is that
actually
true?
We weren't baptized in the FLD church. We were baptized. I at least was baptized in the Baptist church. I'm not sure, Matt.
You guys never received any.
I remember Dad baptizing one of our sisters in a creek behind his house.
No, it was up the canyon. I remember it. It was snowing.
It was in Camas, whatever.
But because
that must have been Rachel then.
I remember it being
because I remember driving up the canyon. And Dad baptizing Faith in like one of the big cottonwood.
But you guys,
creeks.
According to the Mormon stance, you guys none of that was. Well, I guess besides your sister, maybe. Well, no, but even your sister, because she wasn't baptized under the actual somebody with the Aaronic priesthood or Melchizedek priesthood. I was technically, according to the canonized Mormonism. So is that the celestial kingdom, unless I change my stance, the highest level that I could ever hope to achieve?
I don't know.
Okay,
and because here's what I know, especially in the 1960s and 70s, there were people like Bruce R. McConkie, who are general authorities even in the First Presidency, and others who published books which seem so incredibly confident. Wow, this connects all the things that we needed connected, and it's just a lot of their confidence that really is not the teachings of the church, and the church has even acknowledged that. And so some experiences that influenced me from the Book of Mormon, I realized, okay, you got Nephi in the first book of Nephi who says, I want to see what my papa saw. I know that he had a dream and he received revelations. I want to see it. He's shown it, and he's shown more. I've never had an experience like that. I'm confident that my Heavenly Father is capable of giving me that if I'm ready to receive it, and I've actually bugged him a whole bunch saying, there's things I want to learn. I haven't. If I do, I don't even know if I'd be able to share it with you. But unless there's people that I believe are filled with enough spirit of love that they can have those kind of experiences to where, hey, I've been connected to from the other side, and here's what's there.
Well, I feel like I was sincere in all of my questions, even towards God. It's not like I just chose to be an atheist. You know what I mean? All the evidence points to that most of the claims are without evidence, of course. But my issue is I was sincere. It's not like I wasn't filled with enough love. I kind of feel like that's not rude, but you know what I'm saying.
A cop-out?
Yeah, a cop-out. I was completely sincere. There were some times where I would just pray and pray and pray and pray and pray and try to do everything that I was supposed to and be I was completely sincere in what I was doing, but I never received anything. I'm not mad at God. That's why I'm an atheist or whatever. It's just I haven't seen anything. There's been no evidence. But I just wanted to not discredit what you just said. I just feel like it's a cop-out.
Let me. So I shared with you guys. Here I am, 16. Changed my life. Had troublesome years going on. The first experience that I recognized as my Heavenly Father saying, "You're getting influences. This is from me." It was basically saying, "Hey, you felt this for some time. And I naturally came to the decision, okay, make the change." Mm-hmm. I could have denied it at that time. I could have brushed it off, but I didn't. Since that time, here I am, 36 years old now, mm-hmm. and I've had about a dozen different times in my life experience to where unmistakable, my Heavenly Father reaching out and making sure I received communication or support as I needed it. I feel like my Heavenly Father expects me and all of us to grow on our own as much as possible. And it's usually been after long periods of time to where, okay, no, I feel good about the direction I'm going. I feel like I'm helping others, these kind of connections. But those kind of experiences, which I would consider sacred ones, happen in what others might consider few and far between. I feel like it happens enough to keep me going.
So I think we should wrap this up, but I have a couple final questions for you, Jacob.
Hit me!
Do you think faith is a reasonable pathway to truth?
Yeah.
And with that said, do you think, is there anything that I could not believe on faith? Like, I could tell Joe, hey, I think white people are superior to black people, and I believe that based on faith. Is there anything that you couldn't believe?
Yeah. Well, there's some things that we can do. If somebody's saying, well, this is the way to do math and build a bridge. No, this is the way to do math and build a bridge. This 2 + 2 = 4 stuff is just so constrictive. Open your mind, and the bridge collapses. And it becomes easier to discern, well, we see the destruction that happened. If you follow these philosophies, it falls apart.
But that's not faith. That's based on evidence.
It is. And when I take a look at the faith that I've had in my life, it's taken my Mexican grandma, who came from an abusive, and I won't get into the details, we're talking physically and more, abusive home. She left that in her 20s, and even though she still has baggage to where she's 80 years old now, she's still in most ways like a little girl. And it's because of what she experienced when she was little.
Oh,
and she,
yeah, we know people like that.
Yeah, and so and I won't get too much into personal story, but she married somebody who was a return missionary, who my grandpa, and I've shared with you off of a recorded discussion a little bit about my grandfather and his leaving the church and coming back and some of the struggles he had. And I look at the stability within his home. I look at my father leaving an abusive home, and he's still, as strong and as capable as my father has been throughout his life, he still has emotional baggage because of what he went through as a child. And I look at now the 5 kids he has, all of us love each other. All of us look out for one another. Our kids play together, and it's, I hope we try to have more of these moments with cousins. And I would say, hey, we're founded upon this faith, this unity of the faith, even without all the answers. and I would point to the results, and I would say, it has helped us achieve this.
But-
and I would invite others to partake in it.
Matthew and I had certain issues growing up. We left a lot out in the beginning conversation,
But
and
I
we
can
feel
only-
like it's almost the exact same as what you just described, but we haven't had faith. We haven't used faith, and our kids hang out and play, and we try to have this family unity that didn't really exist growing up or didn't really exist in our family. But we haven't used God, Jesus, the Book of Mormon, the Bible, anything. We just used our own moral compasses and empathy that we have towards each other and humanity and society to form these things.
I feel like that's important. I mean, you've got my thumbs up from it. I'm not one of those who falls into, well, you need to believe in the same incorporated franchise that I believe in. I don't believe that. I feel a connection with you guys.
And my what I'm trying to say is I feel like you can reach that. Maybe it sounds a lot like Satan in the Bible, but I feel like you can reach that without doctrination.
Here's what may be more. Here's what I suspect, and I'll just share with you at least a little bit of inclinations of what I believe is going to happen. I believe that you guys, I'm grateful for the experiences that you've had, the stability that you've been able to find, even coming from very difficult circumstances. I hope you guys have lots of kids and pass those lessons of empathy and love on to them. I feel like that's incredibly important. I feel like that what the Latter-day Saints went through, even though it's not necessarily God guides every single thing, they established something beautiful and they passed on lessons that affect me. And I'll share with you a Joseph Smith prophecy as quoted by Mosiah Hancock in his autobiography published in 1864, where Joseph Smith pulled out a map and said, some of the saints will not be allowed to live the laws of God. We're going to go over here. There will be two great political parties which rise up in our nation. One will be the Republican Party, who had never won a major election prior to that. The other will be the Democrats. Those two parties will go to war. They will spend all of America's resources and wealth warring in foreign lands until other lands shall say, let us divide up the United States. And let us divide up the United States, when the men from mountains will swear by the blood of their forefathers that it shall not be divided. Look it up, because it's better than that.
What's the source on that?
Mosiah Hancock, Joseph Smith prophecy on the United States from Mosiah Hancock. So I believe some of the impressions that I had that I have still. There's going to be major changes inside of our country. There's going to be those who have prepped with feelings of freedom, like myself, inside and outside of the church, who will help save our nation as the secret combinations represented by Trump and Hillary Clinton and others are destroying our country and trying to establish a system that's going to have everybody enslaved. So, yes, I believe that there's a purpose for me, there's a purpose for others, and maybe you and I will have more association as things hit the fan, and we got to save things.
So I just want to bring it back to faith real quick.
Yes.
So Hebrews 11:1 says, now faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. The way the Bible describes what faith is, I do not see that faith is a pathway to truth. It can accidentally get you to truth, but it's not a reliable, reasonable pathway to truth.
Well, I don't think we're supposed to use faith for learning brain surgery or many other things. But here's a small...
But isn't the question of which God, or the existence of a God, or which God to believe in, wouldn't that be a more important question than brain surgery?
Yeah, and kind of going back to Joe's thing, that, like I said, it didn't have to be so extreme. So say at Matt's door come up a set of Mormon missionaries and a set of
Jehovah's Witnesses.
Sure. And so, like, there's no way that we could judge on certainty or on sincerity, because I believe that both sets of people are out there preaching what they believe to be the Word of God. They both are using somewhat. So, of course, the Mormons are using slightly different scriptural references in their teachings. And both of them are going to ask you to rely on faith and on your feelings. So, I mean, wouldn't it just be what Matt is more biased to believe? Wouldn't that be more likely to indicate what he's going to end up believing? Or would it be, I mean, I don't know how you can discern truth from one religion to another.
And let me add something to that. Whenever I have this type of discussion with a religious person, they say they have all these evidences. They lay them out. I break them down and explain why they won't convince me, or I don't think why they should convince anyone. And then they always fall back on, well, it's just faith.
It's either faith or personal testimony, I feel.
Yeah.
So
I place a lot on that personal testimony, and I feel like you guys you've already expressed, hey, you judge me to be a person with empathy, that we would feel a connection with each other, even if it weren't for these religious discussions. Mm-hmm. I think that's very, very valuable. I don't know if I've never needed to get rid of it, but the inclination to control anybody else.
Yeah.
And really, I feel like, okay, if I got some light and knowledge to impart to you, hopefully you'd want to be a part of it, and I'm not going to judge you because of it. But you guys probably know high drama people that are, and naturally you'll end up distancing yourself from them.
Oh yeah.
So I feel like we've got a lot of in common. I feel like there's a lot more after this life that's going to happen, and I also feel like there's probably major changes that are going to happen right around us within our lifetime. All of us are pretty young, capable, going to have kids and things like that, and yeah, I think there's a lot more in store for us in this life and the next.
Just to kind of break it down.
Well, what are you going to do? Let's say, bam, the comet hits right now, and I'm on the other side and say, hey, Matt and Joe, you remember when you told me that there wasn't an afterlife? How you feeling about? And I would hopefully never be that.
I would ask questions. I'd be like, all right, well, let's get down to the root of it.
Because here's what I suspect. Okay, here we are now. This is clearly a different existence than the physical one. What's going on? Probably there's a lot of people trying to figure it out there as well.
I definitely wouldn't drop on my knees and start praying to whatever.
Okay.
You know what sucks about being an atheist? I won't be able to tell you were wrong.
You can just do it right now. I'll write a note.
Yeah, that's what I should have inscribed on my headstone. You were wrong.
One of my favorite ones, Far Side, you got Satan opening up the door to hell, and there's a pizza man right there. Who ordered this? You know this is going right back.
Well, do you guys have anything else for our great Mormon friend Jacob?
No, I think that does it.
I think we're pretty good. I wanted to jump on a Reformed Egyptian a little bit, but we don't have to. We could just play guitar and hang out.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the basics of Reformed Egyptian, just real quick, is that that's what Joseph Smith translated from, was a Reformed Egyptian.
Supposedly.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Reformed Egyptian, basically, it's written in Hebrew, but with Egyptian characters. That was on the tablets. I can't remember if it was Nephi or Lehi. For he, having been taught in the language of the Egyptians, therefore he could read the engravings and teach them to his children, the engravings of his father. The Hebrew have been altered by us also. So it sounds like it was a form of both Egyptian and Hebrew. But they also said that none other people knoweth our language. There has been Hebrew scriptures in Hebrew language that was written using Egyptian characters, but those have been easily translated. The demonic Egyptian is an example Mormon scholars give as almost like an original of Reformed Egyptian. It's basically the reason why they use Reformed Egyptian so they could save room on the tablets. But with Hebrewism, they could have saved a lot more room. The Egyptian, like the demonic languages or hieroglyphs, are actually a lot more longer. If you're not a linguist or whatever, a linguist expert, at first you would see that it was shorter, but it's actually quite a bit longer. The Hebrew language has 23 characters, while the shorthand demotic language has a lot more characters. But also comparing the characters given to Professor Anthon by Harris, Reformed Egyptian characters are actually longer than the demotic. And what's funny is the demotic came around in 700 BC when Lehi or Nephi left. It was 600 BC. And so the claim that it was demotic was almost a parent language of Reformed Egyptian is basically false. But yeah, I just wanted to point some of those out.
Yeah, and I never saw the golden plates or anything like that.
Nobody has.
But some of the things that pop into my mind that made me think, as I start to feel a little bit of connection with the characters in the Book of Mormon, when Mormon starts to express, I can't say things the way that I want to because of the limitation of the language that I'm using. If I could write this in the language that I was born in, it would be perfect. But even that language has been altered. And some of the frustrations that he has, right now we have at least enough connection in language with digital communication, so popular culture will go across the globe very fast. Mm-hmm. But you take a look at, I've recently learned words like on fleek.
Oh, yeah.
And lots of other expressions to where I'm a go to the store. And other things to where it makes perfect sense. But those are examples to where in a very short amount of time, since I was a little kid, and now that I'm an adult having real little kids, the language has already been changed. And I noticed some of the same frustrations expressed by Mormon that would be expected if it was dealing with, well, there's a written language that's not the common one that we use in these scholastic settings. That's not the common one we use for speaking with one another.
Okay, and just one last question. Are the Nephites, or are Native Americans the children of Nephites?
Probably.
So even though all of the anthropology points that they were...
Isn't there DNA evidence that they aren't?
Yeah, all the anthropology...
Yeah, so the DNA evidence shows the mitochondrial being Asian descent.
Yes.
There's other groups that still leave an open question. No, I don't know how it fits together. I myself, I won't get into this, but I've had, among the few times that I've had dreams that I attribute to something being shared with me from the other side, or maybe something more, it has had inferences regarding that. I don't know how it fits together.
Okay.
Jacob, do you want to let everybody know your social media, where they can find you?
You're going to find me, just look up The Dignitary on iTunes, Springer, any of that stuff. The Dignitary on the Facebook page, a little bit of that.
All right, and remember, you can find the Recklessly, I said it weird again, you can find the Recklessly Skeptical podcast on Stitcher, on
Spreaker,
on YouTube. You can email us at recklesslyskeptical@gmail.com. And join us on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/The Evil Atheists. And remember, the atheists is always plural.
Until next time, think passionately.
We love you.
Book of Mormon stories that my teachers tell to me are about the Lamanites in ancient history. Long ago their fathers came from far across the sea, in this land if they live righteously.
See you next time. Peace.